Good evening, everyone. This is the 7 p.m. live. My name's Lottie Passell-Syms, and this recording is going to be put on the Facebook page. So if anybody joins me, please be mindful of sharing your information because it will be heard by everybody on the Facebook page. So welcome. I'm going to be talking about obstacles within relationships and consent. I've been thinking about this all day, really, and thinking about my client work and how I'm working. And I wrote a list of the things that I've been listening to today. So my week is made up of people coming in with things that are stopping them from getting on with each other. So what are the obstacles that can stop a relationship from flourishing? And this is what's come in today. So communication, there's a mismatch of communication. And sometimes that can be because the message that's being given isn't translated across to the other person for an understanding. So I do believe that the person giving the message needs to repeat it differently. So the person receiving it needs to go, I don't understand that. That's really confusing. Could you say it in a different way? That's one element of it. The other one is arguing about the past and the resentments. That's quite a lot at the moment. People coming in and saying 5 years ago, somebody came in and said 20 years ago, I remember when this happened, when I didn't feel like I was autonomous. I was left with a baby. I wanted to go and get a career after I'd given up my career, to have a family. So lots of resentments, and they need to be really looked at because actually those resentments, some of them were negotiated between both of the partners, but now they're starting to seep through as in it's unfair or that's not what I signed up for. Then we've got different parenting styles. That's been very figural this week, and asking for attention. How do we ask for attention within a relationship? Infidelity, and also past family of origin traumas that are playing out in the relationship now. And that's very current at the moment. People are still acting out like they are that young person in this relationship, hoping for their wounds to be healed so that they can actually get them healed by somebody who wasn't even there in their childhood, and can be quite difficult. But also looking at how we navigate relationships that have got triggers in them so that we can investigate them, see what they are, and then hopefully the person that you're with will stop pressing that button for you. Your job is to make sure that they can't, because we develop a way of actually pressing our own button for the trigger, and then we're able to tolerate what comes towards us. So lots of obstacles that stop us from connecting with each other in the relationship. So when I think about that, I want to go sort of through some of them, but in more detail, because when we have the lovely couples that come to see us and they want to commit to the relationship, we need to find out what's stopping them doing that. And some of the work that I do is John Gottman. So we talk about the behaviors, and I'm very much into behavioral processes. So we to look at criticism, stonewalling, defensiveness, and contempt. So if we're bringing up things from the past, we're actually accusing our partner of either lying or not telling the truth, or we're becoming very, very negative in the talk, like I hate you, then we've actually gone to a contempt place. Now, contempt is the door to divorce, and we need to try and get our clients to really think about their behavior. Why are they sitting in this place so broad now of actually, I don't respect you anymore? So how did they get to there? And how can we get them to either take a step back and commit to the relationship in a different way, or is it too late for that relationship to come together, or is it too fractured? So let's go back to communication breakdowns. Okay, I mentioned that first of all. Communication and intimacy are the first things that leave a relationship, because if we can't talk to each other, we can't get close to each other. It's almost like that barrier goes up, as in, you don't get me, I can't talk when I want to, because I feel like what comes back at me is accusatory or upsetting. So we then let go of the intimacy that we had, because we feel like, I don't want to be close to you, I don't want to touch you, I don't want to have sex with you. So we have two elements there. The communication starts to falter, then the intimacy starts to go. So there's a breakdown in all of that. Then we look at the trust issues behind that. How can I trust you if I can't tell you something that I need to share with you? So my couples today were really interesting, because one side of the couple would be quite overt about saying, this is what I want, this is how I feel. But the other side of the relationship felt very tentative to share what they wanted to share. And one of my couples said today, it's just about making her happy. And there's a real sadness for me with that, because the trust that's we want to focus on or actually encourage is that you both get your needs met in different ways and find out what's available to you. And the strange thing was, she was saying, I'd love to know what you want. And he was saying, actually, it's about you. It's not about me. It's about both of you. So we need to build up that trust for the person who feels that they can't say what they need. And we need the person who gets their needs met to say, what would you like? What can I give to you? Now, a lot of this stuff is from a family of origin. Were you heard as a child? Did you have a voice? Were you allowed to have a voice? Did you actually stonewall much of the time? Because actually doing something different would have been either dangerous or not advantageous at the time. Then we look at conflict resolution. Okay, this can be quite a challenge. What is your conflict style? Are you a sulker? Are you someone that goes completely forward? Are you somebody that compromises? Would you actually think, well, I've got to win, and the other person's going, well, I've got to win? So the conflict styles, there's quite a few of them, but we've got to look at actually see what conflict style we're using. Because if we're using the same one, we both are using the same one, or we're using different ones that don't align with each other, we are going to get the same results every single time. And what I want us to really think about is what is it that I want from my partner in this conflict? David Schnartz talks about conflict is growth trying to happen. And out of all the quotes that I have, that is my favorite quote, because I really believe that actually if we can see conflict as something trying to evolve, something's trying to change, but we haven't got the vocabulary to say what we want. What we do is we go in with defensiveness. I've got to say what I want, you've got to say what you want, but we clash and we can't hear each other. And what I want us to do is actually slow down that process really, really slowly. So I've talked about this before, the imago dialogue. The imago dialogue is something that is so useful for couples to actually integrate within their relationship. It's very simple, okay? And I love it. And it gives you the opportunity, first of all, it slows down the way of being, okay? It gives you the opportunity to give the opportunity for the person to say what they want to say to you. So it would be something like frustrated when, okay? So we've got an emotion there, first of all, the frustration, and you don't put your laundry in the laundry basket, for example, okay? So the emotion is you don't put the emotion is frustration, and the deed or the action is not putting stuff in the laundry basket. What we're doing is we're doing very small sentences so the actual other person can say back to us, what I've heard you say is you get frustrated when I don't put the washing in the wash basket. Is that correct? The other person who's given the message says, yes, that's correct. The other person then says, is there anything else on that subject? Now, if there is something on that subject, you still carry on the imago dialogue as though you've started it. Yes, there is. Then you'd say another short sentence. They would say, what I've heard is, say, is there anything else on that subject? Or is that correct? Is there anything else on that subject? If there isn't anything else on that subject, what you're looking for is empathy. How can we repair something that actually really irritates us or frustrates us, that we can then go, I can really hear that when I do that, I come from a place of I can't be bothered. And you are getting to the stage where I can see that you can see that I'm not bothering. The laundry basket's just there. Why don't I do it? So I'm sorry that I do that, and I will do it from now on. Now that's a contract that we've just made. Okay, it's not just a random sentence. In my therapy room, we've just made a contract that actually there will be no laundry on the floor anymore when the basket's just there. Now, this isn't about the cup that you don't put in the washing machine, the dishwasher. This is not about the clothes that you don't put in the laundry basket. This is about the respect when you've been asked to do it and you just ignore it. So we've got some ambivalence within the relationship, or we've got some apathy within the relationship. So the imago dialogue can be really useful when we're talking about how can we stop the communication breakdown and do this in session. So I get them to do this in session. Think of something quite mundane that you can do in session so you can actually start eliminating that obstacle whatever it might be, to actually move on and have a better communication, more transparency in how you're feeling, and give each other the opportunity to be heard. The other one that comes into the room quite a lot as well is financial disagreements. I always want people to look at where the root of the money that they think about comes from. Usually comes from family of origin. So it can be poverty, or it can be rich, or it can be in between. What we need to do is find out why somebody's getting quite stressed about the money. Somebody's spending too much, somebody's spending too little. We need to find the root cause of that, where that process has come from, because actually it can cause really big problems within the relationship, because we're not able to say, this is my fear about it. I can see that actually you've maybe got money or had money and it doesn't mean anything to you, but actually I'm sitting in fear of going back to maybe a poverty state or an unstable way of living, and I can't cope with that. And then we come to intimacy issues. Okay, these are obstacles that might be in the way of the relationship coming together. So intimacy, like I said in the very beginning, is communication sort of goes first. It starts to break down, then intimacy disappears. We do not want to be friendly with somebody that doesn't understand us, or we're not heard, or we haven't got a voice. And some of the things that are done when we're doing this is sometimes we say something and it can get dismissed. Sometimes we can say something and it actually gets misinterpreted. So we need to really think about how we're talking to our partner and how they're responding to us. You know, an action has a response, and we're trying to align that with the partnership so that we can both be heard. So what we're looking at, so I gave you a list just a minute ago of like arguing about certain things, different parenting styles, communication, asking for attention. How do we ask our partner for attention? So I had somebody in here today who was saying about when I feel that we're with that person's family, they feel like they're not being bothered about. So they text their partner and just say, just feeling a bit lonely, or actually, can you come over here because I want to talk to you for a minute. So they haven't got the skills or the vocabulary sometimes to say what they want. So we're doing a text process at the moment. However, I want the other person to go into therapy to work out why they need to be validated in a family setting. It's not just about this one person rescuing the other person all of the time. And they might be doing that for a reason, their own family of origin, but they might also be disabling that person to not enable themselves to cope with that separation. So there might be a little bit of codependency going on there. So when I'm talking about all this, these are obstacles to actually having a relationship. So we're always going to argue, but it's how we argue. And it's actually seeing conflict as growth instead of a really negative outcome all the time. The only time it's negative is if we stay in the power struggle all the time and we keep going in that cyclical process. It's the same argument dressed up as a different criteria, which it really isn't. It's usually about resentments or not getting your needs met or lack of attention or different principles or belief systems. So how can we be effective when we're talking about interventions, actually helping couples with being able to communicate better? So I've just mentioned the Imago dialogue, but I also want to mention the 3A, so agenda, aggression, and attitude. If we go towards our partner with any of those three in tow, we will not have a great outcome. We've got an agenda. I want to have what I want from this person, and I want to say it in a way that I get my own way. We've got an agenda, we've got needs, okay? That's not wrong. But if we go towards that person without actually thinking about what they might say back to us, which is an assumption, we need to be curious. I want them to be as curious to each other as I am when I'm in the therapy room. What do you want from me? What would you like me to do in this? Be curious, ask questions. Don't shut down when you first hear something. Tell me more. Give me an opportunity to understand you more. Why are you asking for this at 10 o'clock at night? What's happened to you at 9 o'clock when we were downstairs? Why couldn't you ask for it then? What was going on for you? So we're getting the vocabulary of the clients to really open up. So when we talk about Socratic questioning, it's about being able to not just do a yes and no question. It's about being able to say, tell me more. I'm really interested in what you just asked me. So it's very difficult to go yes or no with that. Somebody's really interested in you, and it makes you want to actually give them more information about what you're trying to get the need met or the process that you're asking for heard. Then the other ones obviously is agenda and aggression. Don't go towards your partner with aggression. You don't actually get anywhere, and it escalates and it can turn out worse. So be mindful of the 3 A's when you go forward. What's my process? What am I trying to get from my partner? You remember I said just a minute ago, when you're arguing with somebody, it's really useful to say, what is it that you would like from me? Or what is it that you want from me? Because an argument is trying to escalate something that's being wanted or needed. That doesn't mean you'll get it. It's about negotiating. When we're thinking about building trust, how do we put something together as a therapist for our clients? How do we help couples grow the trust? So if you think about infidelity, okay, just for a minute, the trust shouldn't be there, okay? People who trust quickly want safety. They want, let's be back together and let's be okay with each other. There might be some codependency, but sometimes not, because the actual act of infidelity makes us want to cling on. There's fear of abandonment. However, we need to be thinking about, how do I accept this as part of my relationship if I'm choosing to stay? How can I forgive the stuff that I've felt for myself? Okay, so when I'm talking about forgiving yourself, I'm talking about the detective that you become, the person you don't recognize that you've become because of this. Forgiving yourself, being kind, so kind to yourself, because actually you become a person that you don't even know who you become. And then we look for trust probably a year later. So building trust in a relationship after infidelity is different to actually thinking about trust in the relationship. And we're going to talk about sort of consent and boundaries. What boundaries? And when you consent to something, it means that you've collaboratively worked it out together. If you've done that and then the boundaries are crossed, it's when we need to have a really in-depth chat about that. Because if we're trying to build the trust, we definitely need consistency. We need sameness. We need things to build and build and build. So if you say you're going to pick the kids up, if you say you're going to cook a dinner, if you say you're going to be there at 5 o'clock, we need to get that consistency really intact, because every time you're let down, you will feel like, okay, here we go again. So we need to build the trust over time for whatever feeling we feel. And the trust might go because you're not heard. But you need to say to people, I don't feel heard in this relationship. And interestingly enough, in session, somebody go, I listen to you all the time. Okay, that's not the answer. The answer is, I've just dismissed you saying I'm not getting heard, to I hear you all the time. What we've got to say is, tell me when I don't. Give me some ideas of what happens to you when you think I'm not listening to you. So the communication gets bigger and bigger and bigger. We get more curious about what the other person's trying to say to us. Financial planning, I don't know whether some therapists do this outside. I will help with the process of the thought of it, but I won't do financial planning as in paperwork and all that sort of stuff. It can be a real deal breaker when we're really in a flux of financial, because it makes us feel very unsafe. On one of the other lives that I've done, I've talked about Tony Robbins, and the first element of our relationship style is safety. And when we talk about communication, we talk about arguing, we talk about abandonment, we talk about rejection, we're talking about safety. How safe do I feel within this relationship? And that is the number one sort of guide to actually talking to each other about where we are in the relationship. And interestingly, today, someone said, I don't ever hit you. Why do you not feel safe with me? This is not safety from a domestic violence place, okay? This is safety from an inner child process of things that have happened where you've actually gone back to, I'm not feeling okay with myself or with the person that I'm with at the moment. So these will be those, what I call the big words: the rejection, the abandonment, the loneliness, the emptiness, the isolation, where you had to go and find your own resources. And if your partner suddenly pulls away or there's a disagreement, it will really rock you if your family of origin has come from a place of dismissive or not there. I want to put a caveat on this. I'm not blaming parents. So, okay, our family of origin is what it is. Okay, our attachment style is not. We have an attachment style that we generate for our coping strategy, but our attachment style can change as we progress through life. So it doesn't have to stay anxious and avoidant. It can become secure. So we don't have to think this is who I am as an attachment. So there's 4 attachments. One is the one that says that we are secure, and there's 3 others that indicate that we're not so secure within relationships or with ourselves, and how close we can get to a client. So that's really useful to know about your attachments are, but it doesn't mean that you'll stay the same. So when we talk about the interventions that we can put together, how do we then make that work in a relationship? So what are we doing to be able to say, right, okay, what I want you to do is the intervention is this. How do we actually then embed it into the relationship? So when we're talking about trust, or we're talking about communication, one of the things that I put together is the relationship vision. Not something that I came up with, but one of the things I did with it is I changed the ending of it, because we do lots of work where we do a relationship vision, and then they know the vision of each other. Okay, so they can see the things that they want, they can see the things that they might be able to trust, or if there's conflict or change. But that's just a list. What we need to do then is get that list and then choose really prioritize the 3 things that are important to each of them and make a contract with it. Because what we're doing with the relationship vision is building trust. We're building communication. We're building trust. We're actually going to complete these 6 things within 6 months. So you're getting your clients to work through that process so that the couples can really feel that there's some progress going on. What are the 3 things that I value? What are the 3 things that you value? What do we want to accomplish in this process? One of the things that I absolutely love is I love the here and now. I think if we can keep people in the here and now, it's really important. The goal-orientated part of us is the future is just a thought, okay? But the future within a relationship gives us hope. It gives us an advantage to go, this is looking like something that's going to stay together. So the abandonment goes down, the rejection goes down. So we're in the here and now. So we're in the process of what the conflict is and allowing it to be in that moment what it is. So going through the pain barrier. Christine Dunkley talked about go round it, go over it, but you've got to go through it to get any resolution within the relationship. The relationship vision gives you the opportunity to go, okay, next month we will be doing this together. Okay, I had one couple that actually decided to go to, I think it was Nairobi or somewhere like that, and do charity work or building a toilet, and they had to do it together, and their communication skills were really bad when they went. But because they had to negotiate with each other and draw a plan and say how it would work, and really limited tools and materials, they ended up really talking to each other. So from adverse processes, if we give clients and beautiful couples this work to do, they can find their way back to each other. The other one I had today was balancing time and priorities. I think we need to have our relationships in our phones. Our phones are like lifelines. I was listening to the radio the other day, and I think it was 7 young people had the phones taken off them, and they had to cope for a week. And then they did it to the adults, and it was like they'd lost a limb. They really felt like they were not connected. How could they order anything? They felt really lost. Okay, so I think we are in that technological age, and I think we should use the phones to our advantage. And I think your name, both of your names being in the phone, is so important. And what I do with my couples is I think about the things that you need to talk about. So let's talk about date night. No, let's talk about date hour. Okay, date night can be really stressful. What we need to do is actually think about the time we've got within the parameters of all the things that we do. So let's do 1 hour date. Okay, then let's have a financial evening, 1 hour. Let's have a boundary evening, the things that are frustrating me within the relationship, maybe chores, for instance. Okay, I feel like I'm holding the load. What can you give me each morning? So wake up and say to each other, I can give 70%. I feel quite energized. I can give 70% today. Can you give 30? And that might change as the week goes on. So what we're doing is really communicating with each other and giving each other that opportunity to really think about each other. We have to prioritize our relationship massively. We do for work. We really pull all the stops out for work or our boss or deadlines, but we don't do that for a relationship. And it's really important. And we need 6 hours a month without fail to start bringing the relationship back on track. So the obstacles that you might be facing within your relationship can be looked at and can be negotiated. But after we've negotiated them and we've looked at them, we need to really think about, how do we maintain this? Okay, so you might do half an hour, 15 minutes each, just talking about your day. Let's do a 15-minute each day talk. Okay, if we don't do 15 minutes, one person might come home and say to the other person, I've had a terrible day, I want to tell you about it. And it might go on for 2 hours. It's too long. Okay, we need to do little tiny. When you think of therapy and how, sort of boundaried it is with the time that we see people, that gives us an opportunity to really get down to the work. Okay, in hypnotherapy, it's what we call the fluff. Get rid of the fluff and actually say what the emotion is from work, who was actually involved, what's your target to do something different, how could you be different in this situation, and what are you going to do about it? How long has it been going on for? We can have a really good discussion about it and have some resolution from it. We're not asking our partner to be that resolution person, work it out for me. But what we're saying is, can you listen to me? Okay, you've got to work it out yourself, but the other person is supportive. I've noticed when we don't work from the best of us, we can then start colluding with the job process and we end up arguing with each other, which has got nothing to do with each other. Is actually the projection is being put in the relationship instead of in where the work stuff is. So we need to prioritize the relationship more than we ever have. Okay, we have so many processes going on outside of the relationship that we need to make sure that we prioritize it. I like the word sacred. I think if you're going to be in a relationship, then make it sacred. What is it that you could have? You're not friends. That's the wrong say. You are friends, okay, but you're more than friends. So I look at a relationship as friendship, intimacy, and sex. And if anybody takes that off the agenda for any reason, we need then to have a discussion about it. Why have you actually, do I feel like you're not as nice to me? The friendship seems to have eroded. What's going on there? Actually, our intimacy is not going. It's because you're not talking to me. Actually, we're not having sex anymore. You've opted out of the contract. And this isn't a signed contract. This is an unwritten contract that in my brain goes with the relationship. If you agree, that's great. If you don't agree, most of the people in my room agree because they want some form of structure. So thinking about obstacles, when we have an obstacle in front of us, whatever that might be, from communication to debt to sex, whatever that might be, how can we overcome that obstacle? And we actually can, as long as we don't let it go to that rumination, that resentful place, that it's not fair, it's unjust, or victim place. We can actually pull ourselves from it and be able to negotiate that. Usually not with each other. Obviously, I'm a great advocate of therapy, and we can't do it through friends because they have their own agenda. But if you come and see a therapist, you'll be able to work through some of that stuff. Let's talk about consent and boundaries. For me, this month has been very much about my boundaries and what I'm willing to do and not willing to do. And I think consent, choosing to choose something, I think for some people can be really, really difficult. Okay, it might be something that you've never done. It might be something that you'd like to do, but it feels too risky. When you are sitting in a place of consent, which includes boundaries, holding your own boundaries, there's a really fantastic empowerment to it. So last week for me, I put a boundary in. I consented to something that I changed my mind about. And I was waiting, to be honest, for that euphoric feeling of making a decision for myself, and it never came. What came was relief, knowing that I'd done something that I needed to do for myself, and the reasoning behind it was valid. Actually saying that to somebody else was painful to be with and to watch, but knowing it wasn't personal, it wasn't about the person, it was about me choosing not to do something that I know would have been detrimental for my own mental health. So from experience, and I'm sure that's not the first consent or boundary that I've put in, but it felt very figural, right here for me. And that's why I wanted to talk about consent. So when we say the word consent, most people go sex. Okay, we think, right, am I consenting to something? Is it what I want? But I feel like consent is right the way through a relationship. Am I consenting to listen to this conversation that actually is quite disturbing for me? Am I able to consent to something that my partner really believes I should believe in because that's his belief system or her belief system? But I'm consenting to it, but I can feel my power being taken because actually it's not what I'm aligned to. It's not where I'm feeling it, but we go along, we will collude with certain consent because we feel that that's the right thing to do. And what would be the consequence of coming out of it? There might be a loss of something. Okay, so we prefer to collude with consent than hold on to it. And when we talk about therapy work, we're talking about boundaries. How do we hold a boundary? What have I chosen to not do? So that's me either consenting to something or not consenting to something, and then holding that boundary really tight. So a boundary for me is something that actually is I'd like it to be a mutual agreement with whoever I'm talking to. Depends on the agenda of what the other person was asking you, but really it would be great if we could have a mutual agreement that this consent that I'm giving that I don't want to do is valued, is actually being heard from a place of perspective, being in the other person's shoes for a minute. I know that now that's not something that you want to do, and I can really hear that that's quite distressing for you, or it's a memory for you, or it's something that actually just doesn't work for you. Seeing the other person's perspective, which can be really, really difficult, but it actually it's verbalizing the agreement between both of you. Now, when we verbalize something and we say yes to something, I do believe when we talk about consent and where it takes ourselves, we can change our minds. Now, when we talk about sex, we automatically think that actually from beginning, middle, and near to the end, we can not consent. We can say to, whether it's in our brain and we're not saying it out loud, but actually we're allowed to go, I don't want to do this anymore. Can you get off? Or actually don't touch me like that. We actually can do that. The difference between being able to know that and actually to be able to instigate that can be very, very different. I do on the playbook, I do a very small exercise about saying no and yes, and it's so powerful. When I say the no, some of the no's are very forthright, and some of the no's are actually with a little giggle, and some of the yeses sound like they should be no's. So we've got to really think about how we speak, how our language comes across in our consent. Are we being forthright enough for somebody to understand that actually that's not acceptable? Or are we doing a little giggle after it because actually we feel quite uncomfortable putting a boundary in, a consent in? And then we need to hold that boundary as tight as we possibly can, because how difficult was it to put that consent in the first place? Now, the word I wrote down here was violation, which I do believe that actually if we go along on that path of consenting to something that we don't want to do, and if the other person is aware that we don't want to do it, there's a violation. And it's quite traumatizing. And we need to be able to say to someone, I'm not doing this for the reasons that I'm not doing it. And I'm hoping that I can be heard, and I hope that the couples can be heard. Okay, so whether that's consenting for something that it isn't sexual. Okay, this is not something I believe in, my value system, my cultural upbringing. This is not something I can actually sit and tolerate. It actually really affects me. Or sexually, being able to hold that boundary and being able to talk about all this before all of this comes about. So when somebody's talking to you and you can hear that grating of like, yeah, that's not okay for me to be with someone who thinks like that or acts like that. So we'd have a discussion about sexually, we need to talk about sex. I believe that we should be talking about sex so much more than we ever do in a maturity way, so that we can actually put boundaries in before anything can happen. So that's really important. The boundaries are our personal boundaries. What do we want to hold on to that gives us the opportunity to feel empowered, to have confidence, to grow our self-esteem? All of that is paramount to how we want to live the life that we're living. We have a choice of how to live. I talk very much about differentiation. When we talk about obstacles in a relationship, we're talking about gridlock. We're talking about I'm stuck. I want my way and you want your way. You've got needs and I've got needs, but we can't hear each other. The gridlock is when we start looking at differentiation. You are both an I. You always have been. That's never changed. But becoming into a relationship, you then lose yourself within it. Or, and interestingly today, you live someone else's dream, what their needs are, what they want, and you forget about yourself. Again, looking at boundaries, looking at the obstacles that stop us fully fulfilling our own destiny. And when I talk about sex, I am very much about birthright, being able to have a sexual relationship. Some people aren't or don't. And I believe that actually we need to navigate this. It's not I can do what I want, which we know that. It's about negotiating what is okay and what's not okay within the relationship. So I feel like all of that really goes together, because I feel like when we're talking about obstacles, we're talking about consenting to things that we agree or don't agree with, but we're also talking about boundaries. I wanted to talk about, this is sort of going off piste a little bit, but I think it's quite important. When we're trying to talk to our partner, and depending what cultural influences we had, we can get emotionally flooded by all of this. So when we're sitting with someone and they're trying to tell us what they need, and we come from a place of chaos family, okay, or overwhelming family, we will be overwhelmed by somebody asking for something that they need from us, and they're entitled to ask for it. But it's actually navigating how we can hold that space for ourselves to ask and for the other person to hear. So when we talk about John Gottman stuff, we're talking about stonewalling. When somebody's flooding, they're not just leaving because they can't be bothered. They've got emotional flooding. It's become too much. And it doesn't mean you're too much. It means what's being asked for might not be compatible. It might not be something that they've ever thought of. It might be something that they can't even comprehend that they would be able to give that to you. So stonewallers are somebody that's sitting in a corner or going off somewhere to actually regulate themselves, to bring themselves back down. Also, the disengagement of overwhelm, because we've been talking about how we're going to get people back online, how we're going to do the interventions. If somebody's sitting in a place of overwhelm, there will be a disengagement. They will be going, I don't think I can navigate this. We've got to actually work with both the couples in witness. And what I mean by that is we don't ask one of them to leave and the other one to stay, and we do separate sessions. If we've got some overwhelm in the room, we need to do witnessing. So one person listens to the other person's way of being, how they've navigated the world so far, because they've been overwhelmed in other situations, and how have they coped with that. What you already know, okay, which is utilizing what you already know and the resilience that you've had, you can then utilize that to go forward. I also want to bring up harsh and soft setups. John Gottman talks about in his lovely book, The 7 Stages of a Marriage, is how we talk to each other. If you have a harsh setup, because you really want your needs to be met, and sometimes you've asked for them and they've not been heard. So we actually change the tone, so they're quite harsh setups, because we think if we say it quickly and harsher, we'll actually get the person to give in. It doesn't work. What we need is soft setups to be able to come back again and again and again. If we do harsh setups, the other person will be walking on eggshells and we won't be able to go towards them at all. I talked about gridlock and differentiation. When we're in gridlock, we are completely stuck. And differentiation is going, right, let's look at you two as individuals first before we can actually bring you back together as a couple. What are your dreams, your adventures, your aspirations, your fantasies, your kink, your what you want to say, what you want to develop within the relationship for you, just for you. Okay, so I think sometimes I get my clients to write, what would your sexual script be? What would your timeline be? We need to actually write a list of actually what do I want for me whilst I'm in this relationship. So important. Then we've got negative sentiment override. When we've got negativity within the relationship. So there's all these obstacles, and it feels like they are forever mountains trying to climb. It goes round and round and round. Negative sentiment override is when one couple or both have actually suddenly the one of them wakes up and they go, do you know what? I'm going to make an effort. This is in their head, remember? They haven't said it to their partner. They go down and go, do you want a cup of tea? And the other person goes, maybe. Why? What they're doing is the negative sentiment override is so strong here that conversation has just hit there, and they're going, what's that about? They think there's an agenda going on. Why are you being nice to me? Negative sentiment override is something that actually can stop repair. So when we talk about trying to repair a relationship and go back into really pure communication and repair some of the things, if we've got negative sentiment override, it's impossible. I had a couple once, he'd been repairing for a year, and she said, when? I'd not even noticed. Her negative sentiment override was mistrust, not being able to sit in this relationship authentically, didn't feel that she had the autonomy to be able to say what she wanted. So she just closed up. So nothing went in whatsoever. And he was devastated. He said, I've done this and I've done that. And she said, well, I thought that's what you should do. I didn't think that was extra. So we've got to make sure that actually the communication is much more pure, but the person it's going towards, they've got open arms or open heart, so that actually it can be let in, because otherwise the repair won't happen. And the other saying I really like is, do you fit in or do you belong? When we try to fit in, and I know this is some of my background, I remember thinking this when I was in my 20s, when I'm trying to fit in, because I was a people pleaser, I would be, how do I need to fit in? So I need to be like a chameleon. So this person likes this, so I'm gonna go into that genre with her, and I'm gonna see this person, and I'm gonna make myself more pliable, she'll be my friend if I do this. So fitting in is very different to belonging. And I remember, like that chameleon, doing different colors, making myself more available, people pleasing right the way through. For me, belonging is when you walk in and you go, I'm home. I feel like I'm safe here. I don't have to be anything more than I am. I can actually sit in this place of safety and comfort, support, sometimes high challenge. We're going to get challenged from our partners because they want to be heard, and vice versa. But that doesn't mean that actually there's not a belonging there. So for me, I'm very much about separating. I separate out rage and anger. I separate out fitting in and belonging. For me, there's something about being able to split stuff in half and go, what does it actually mean for you to try and fit in this relationship? The obstacles are getting you to become that person that shapeshifts all the time. And you end up not knowing what your identity is. So my clients this week have been very much trauma-based from family of origin. So they've not concreted their identity anyway from the very beginning. They would have shape-shifted to different people and taken bits off of different people without them knowing to actually become the identity that they might be now. And what we're doing in therapy is writing a new script. How can we empower these people to find out their autonomy, their belief system, their growth, their differentiation, so that we have the opportunity to navigate all of that. We will always have obstacles, but the possibility of changing the outcome is high, because we can have interventions long as we embed them. So as a therapist, I'm very much embedding stuff. So keeping up with the homework, making sure that your couples are aligned with what they're saying to each other. And when there is a real sort of bump in the road, knowing that they've done some of this stuff before, is what I call utilization. What can you utilize that you know that you've done before and it's worked well? How can we bring that into here now? So if there's any questions, please put them in the chat. I will answer them. I know people don't have to come on camera here, which is absolutely fine. I hope this is aligned enough for you to understand where I was coming from for the two obstacles, consent and boundaries. And I sort of wanted to make it relevant to my week, really. because the obstacles that are coming into the therapy room, it's not impossible to make them possibly better than they were before. So I really believe that. We've got 15 minutes. Is there any questions at all? There doesn't have to be. Think about your boundaries. Think about anybody in your life at the moment that feels like they're crossing them. Think about the consent that you give that you want to take back, or you might want to continue it. And think about some of the obstacles that you might be facing within your relationship as a couple or as a therapist. What are the things that I'm dealing with? What are the mountains that I'm going to climb? If we do a list of things, we can usually cross some off. Our brain says that doesn't seem like priority anymore. I've sort of worked that out myself because I've actually gone to sleep with it, and our brain will implicitly work through the night. We wake up in the morning, it doesn't seem as bad as it was before. So you might do a list of 10 and end up with 5, 6. So start working on those bits with your partner and think about how you can align each other. I don't like compatibility. Not that I don't like it. It's nice when you're compatible with your partner, but it's not the crux of what stays together. It's the alignment. It's your belief system. What are my values? How do I want to parent? How do I want to see my relationship flourish? Who is prioritizing who? And in most of the couples that I see who have children, the children are prioritized. And I want the unit to be the couple. And the children, if there's good coupling, there'll be good parenting. It will disseminate down because your children can see that you are okay. If there isn't any children, the alignment needs to be the same, but you need to prioritize each other, because if you're not and there's no children, it will be something else. It will be golf or the gym or friendships or whatever that might be. Make each other priority. For me, that's like my goal, to actually get people to realize that actually when you choose to be in a relationship, make it number one. Because when you feel safe within it, you then can go off and do other things, because there's no restrictions, there's no control, there's safety. Okay, thank you for attending. This will go on the Facebook page, and I will have another live at the end of next month, and we will put out what it's about, and we'll go from there. Oh, lovely heart. Thank you. Oh, that's so cute. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.